it's almost sad that you do have to say that I have been suppressed as a person that's in the game of baseball. Billy Martin did not, quote, want a nigger to hit cleanup for the New York Yankees, did not want him to have the prestige. I heard that from one of my close friends, and I laughed. I went like, you're crazy. I never paid much attention to it, but I remember hitting 3, hitting 5, hitting 6, hitting anywhere but 4 until Lou Piniella and Thurman Munson went to the owner in Milwaukee in August. And the lineup came out the next day with me hitting cleanup for the first time. And Lou Piniella came over and said to me, "You're now hitting where you ought to be." And it's so sad. It's sick that someone's going to try to do something like that to hold you back when you should be thinking about how you're going to win the game.
Reggie Jackson. Long drive right field. It is goodbye.
Winfield trying to become the first man to accumulate 3,000 hits for his hometown team. Rounded towards the hole.
And Dawson will get a chance to do some damage. Where you love to watch him. He's always hanging in there. Look at this.
Yeah, what a finale for another race.
What a way to finish here for the home folks.
Jeter will bat.
Base hit to right field. Here comes Richardson. Here's the throw for Markakis. Richardson is safe. Derek Jeter ends his final game with a walk-off single.
Four Hall of Famers. We're going to dive into what is going on in our country and what has happened also in the sport of baseball. And Derek, you put this thing together. So why are we all here?
Well, Ace, first, thank you everyone for joining us. But, after the death of George Floyd, one of the first things I did was I got all of our players together, whether it's major league, minor league players, and I had a video conference with all of them. And I wanted to have a dialogue. I wanted to have open and honest communication. And I wanted guys to share how they were feeling. And we were able to do that with our players. We were able to do that with the front office staff. And I think during these times, you need to have uncomfortable conversations. When you start talking about race, it becomes uncomfortable, but those conversations are necessary. This is something that I wanted to do in person, but unfortunately we're not able to do that. But I wanted to get some fellow Black Hall of Fame members together and have a conversation because, I firmly believe it's impossible for you to move forward if you don't know your history. And you're talking about 3 guys here that have lived through segregation. They've lived through the civil rights movement. And I think the current players will benefit from hearing stories from these men. And not only the current players, but the players that come in the future. I think it's important to hear the stories. And I want to thank these guys because I reached out to them. All of them without hesitation said, no problem, no worries, we'll be there. You just let us know when. So I appreciate it.
All right, I love it. And with that, I guess we'll start with some personal stories. Reggie, you played some minor league ball in the South. So the time that you were back there was in the heat of this civil rights movement in the 60s. You were back there. Selma had just happened and you ended up going to Birmingham. Can you tell us a little about playing in the South? What was that like for you?
Playing in the South was horrific. You didn't talk about it. You just accepted things the way they were, because if you talked about it, you were branded as a troublemaker. That certainly was my case. I did not want to go to Birmingham. I either wanted to go back to A-ball or go to AAA. But the owner finally came to Waycross, talked to me, and from there we went to Birmingham and we had dinner at the country club, at his country club. And we got ready to sit down, and I was either the last or one of the last to sit down, and they pointed over at me and said, "He can't eat in here. That boy can't eat in here." And so I kind of looked around, felt like a misfit, or you feel like you could walk under the table standing on your toes. It feels so small. And finally, the owner said, "All right, we're all going to go down to the diner and have hamburgers. I'm going to take the team with me. Everybody else can stay here." And so they had a little meeting and finally let me eat. But the experience was horrific. I'd in 1967, I met Bear Bryant. Bear Bryant and I became friends. And it was June the 20th or so, and we had played against the major league team, and I'd hit a couple triples that night. I was pretty fast, and Bear Bryant was in there. His son was a general manager, and press was around, and I was standing there getting dressed, and Bear Bryant looked at me and said, "This is just the kind of nigger boy that we need. If we don't get them, then SC and the teams from the north are going to come down here and beat up on us." And he said it in a way where he was trying to compliment me because I was young and strong and blah, blah, blah. But it was painful. But everyone in the room accepted it, except me.
How difficult, Andre, was it growing up in Florida? Did you experience a lot of that racism as a youth?
So I went to Florida A&M University, as we know, talking about a HBCU. And most of the schools that we played were in the SIAC, so they were all predominantly black teams that we were playing. But there's one instance, I think my second year, for the first time, we played a predominantly white school, Valdosta State. And we were in Georgia. We were playing in Valdosta. And there was a player at second base. One of my teammates probably went a little bit too hard to take the shortstop from Valdosta State out. And as a result, some pushing and shoving started. Then both benches emptied. And out of nowhere, we see the police show up. And he comes out and he addresses our coach. He says, "You guys got 15 minutes to get on the bus and get out of town." So my coach at the time, he said, "You all heard what the man said, get on the bus." And sure enough, that was the only time we played Valdosta State. And that was the only time I think we were challenged with, this is a black and white thing.
So Dave, All-American Mr. Everything at University of Minnesota. Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he never got the hit in college till his senior year.
Yeah, it's true. Shows you that college coaches don't always know what they're talking about or what they're doing. It was, I always played shortstop because I would always hit and had the good arm, and then I would pitch when I wasn't playing shortstop. I go to the University of Minnesota, and they said, "We just want you to pitch." And, I was okay with it for a minute. And my friends would come to the game and then start hollering in the dugout, "Coach, put Winfield in. He's the best hitter you got." And I'd act like I'm embarrassed. I said, "Louder, louder." I said, "Come on, coach, let me hit." So I come back and I hit the last year. I'm hitting cleanup, pitched the first game, got dirt on the uniform, played left field the next. But I don't know why a coach would do that. Later on, I hear people say, intimate, how he might have felt about me or whatever. But I know, how about this? I know that I was the first scholarship black baseball player at the University of Minnesota. And, once I was drafted by all the sports, I said, if you want me to play baseball, I got to go right to the big league. So I had a little leverage. That's negotiation. And so instead of playing football with the Vikings or Atlanta Hawks or Utah Stars, I said, if I play baseball, got to start. So they, the first year they said, "Yeah, we'll let you do that. Now you got to show me the second year." And I tore it up in spring, as Reggie would say. I tore it up the spring training and made the ball club. But that's kind of how that went.
All right. So one other thing you dropped in there, you played shortstop. You were like a 6'7" shortstop out there picking it.
I was Ripken before Ripken. I could pick it. And this is a true story, guy. Hey, Reggie, I had some good hands, but But you know, a true story. In '74, when I was trying to make the team, my first spring training, I was playing well, but there were so many outfielders before me. They asked me if I could play shortstop. I played a couple of games in spring training at shortstop.
What?
Yeah, man.
Well,
So
we gotta get the film.
Yeah, no, they didn't have
I'm gonna
film
go
back
find
then,
it.
Derek. Derek, they
I'm
didn't
gonna
have
find it.
videotape back then.
3-2 on Winfield. Into right. He's going back. That ball is out of here. Can you imagine that? He is strong. Unbelievable.
Reggie Jackson. Fly ball to right field deep. And it is a home run. And he continues his tremendous series here in Fenway Park.
You know, Reggie, it seems like there's always certain barriers that we're continually trying to break down, and coveted positions. Did you ever experience that when you were coming through, that there were certain positions you weren't going to get to until you had to knock some walls down to do it?
You know, you're talking about position players in baseball, and so they didn't think we were good enough thinkers in order to pitch. And same thing went with being a catcher. You very seldom saw a black catcher. And one of the greatest players in history, Josh Gibson, was a catcher, never really played in the big leagues. But then one of the first was between Elston and Johnny Roseboro. But even after them, you did not see very many black catchers. And the same way with pitchers. So those were positions on the field, Harold, that you just did not see. You can go further with it on staff, whether it be managers, but those are positions that have become very special in the game of baseball. It's very seldom that you see a black pitching coach. They don't get those opportunities as much either.
Line drive up the right field side, going to be in there for extra bases. The ball stays underneath the padding down there along the right field wall, and Webster's going for three. Here's the throw. He's out. What a throw by Andre Dawson.
For me, as a kid, the only thing I ever wanted to do was play baseball. Once I was introduced to the game by my uncle, who bought me my first fielder's glove, I kind of pretty much ate and slept baseball. Once I get drafted, I got promoted to AAA as a result of some injuries at the big league level. In the first 14 games in AAA, I hit 12 home runs. So I said to myself, this can't be this easy. But I got an opportunity in Atlanta Stadium against Fulton County Stadium against a right-hander by the name of Buzz Capra. And I hit my first major league home run. They were contemplating sending me down. I got to start again the next day against a right-hander. I got a couple of hits. And then all of the talk about being sent back to the minor leagues sort of subsided. They gave me the opportunity to play on an everyday basis. And I went on ahead and I won the Rookie of the Year award. So for me, it was just listening to the veteran players. And I had some guys that took me under their wings, but it was listening to the veteran players. And once I got there wasn't looking back. I wanted to stay there. And I just knew that work ethic had to be something that I just had to make a little impeccable.
Andre, you said growing up, you ate and you slept baseball. What do you think has changed nowadays for black athletes growing up? Why do they not eat and sleep baseball? What's changed and how do we get it back?
I just feel it's a lost commodity, first of all, in the urban communities. And that's why we are seeing a decline in the percentage of African Americans. I think the sport itself has gotten to be too expensive. The game at that age level is geared toward travel ball and showcases, and it's very, very expensive. And it's a tough goal for low income kids if they're not baseball inclined. Their biggest stars today, the players that they follow are guys like the Kobe's when he was alive, LeBron, the Durants, the Steph Currys, now Lamar Jackson. I think they're more inclined to go the route of basketball than football. And that's why I say it's a lost commodity. But we got to find out, as a community, we got to find out, how do we get that back? How do we get the interest level back? And until we do that, we're going to continue to steadily see the decline itself.
Mays hits it in the left field. There goes number 3,000. Willie Mays gets his 3,000th base hit.
1 ball and no strikes. Aaron waiting. The outfield deep and straight away. Fastball is a high drive into deep left center field. Buckner goes back to the fence. It is gone. What a marvelous moment for the country and the world. A black man is getting a standing ovation in the Deep South for breaking a record of an all-time baseball idol.
Let me ask you guys, who were your heroes growing up? And Derek, I'm going to start with you. Who were one of the guys that you looked to as your heroes?
Well, it was Dave. I mean, I was a huge Yankee fan growing up. I know everyone's heard. I know Dave's probably tired of hearing the story, but
nah, never.
Up,
my man.
In my eyes, Dave was larger than life physically. I mean, 6'6", 6'7", drafted in all 3 sports. One of the first athletes to start his own foundation. I mean, this was the guy that I looked up to. And the reason why I started my own foundation is because of Dave. And, you sit here and we talk about passing it on, from generation to generation. And when I first came up and started to play, I looked up to, guys that took care of me with Gerald Williams. It was Tim Raines. It was Cecil Fielder. It was Darryl Strawberry. It was Tino Martinez. And these are guys that are sharing experiences with me when I grew up. And I tried to do the same thing. I still continue to try to do the same thing. But Dave was my guy. He was the one I looked up to.
Well, my favorite player was Jackie Robinson. He was the only black player for a while. He, Roy Campanella, and Junior Gilliam on the Dodgers, who were a Dodger fan. And we could sit in the bleachers in left field because that's about the only place you could sit, and then the only place we could afford it was 50 cents. And I rooted for Jackie Robinson, Junior Gilliam, and Roy Campanella. And they had a left-hand hitter that played center field. And he was a home run hitter. And so I didn't tell anybody because he was white, but I rooted for Duke Snyder.
Reggie.
And also a Duke Snyder fan. But when you were young and you watched TV and sports, and you rooted for the black players because, they didn't get chances. They weren't on very many teams. And, there were many teams like the Red Sox and a few others that just waited till the absolute end before they would put a black player on their team. So I was a Jackie Robinson man. I wore number 44 because of Hank Aaron. I was a Willie Mays fan as well. And, also loved Duke Snyder.
Andre, what about you?
I can recall Al Oliver. Al Oliver, to me, was the consummate professional. I mean, you just looked at him, how, his character, how he went about things on a daily basis. He showed you the correct way to dress at that level. He would have about 15, 20 different bottles of cologne. And it just rubbed off on you. And I look back at him, and he was probably my biggest inspiration from a ex-player perspective going forward. And it wasn't a situation where we were teammates that long, but I learned so much from him.
I'll tell you, I look back, the first guy that I tried to imitate, and he means nothing to anybody. Reggie might have played against it. Zoilo Versailles. Zoilo, he was MVP in '65, and because I was a shortstop. I said, let me pick it, And had 6-finger glove. And pitching was Bob Gibson. I was Gibson when I was on the mound. And when I was hitting, it was Willie McCovey. because he instilled fear into the opposition when he stepped in the batter's box. And then all of a sudden we got to be teammates. He put me under his wing. He showed me, just like Andre's saying, how you dress, where you go out. And so once I got to the big leagues, that was my man.
You know, you're starting to see a lot of movement in baseball, a lot of conversations that you guys probably thought you may not ever see. Reggie, I kind of want to go to you. The protests that happened in the last week in baseball started in Milwaukee and kind of went all the way through the game. Did you think you would ever see anything like this in baseball?
No, I can certainly say that for sure, Harold. I think that years ago that we all would have been afraid to do something like that because you were afraid of consequences taking place. And I think that not so long ago, 5-6 years ago, if something like that happened, you know, you'd see borderline players get traded, get shifted away, get sent to the minor leagues. That's the way the game was. But things need to be done to shake up the system. The system it's too calm. It's too accepting. Baseball's my sport. I'm indebted to the game, but I'm embarrassed that we have not made enough change. I'm ashamed that I haven't kicked the door down a little bit more.
What are your suggestions to exact change? What needs to happen moving forward, and what can we capitalize in this time that we're in? And I'll start with you, Reggie.
I think there needs to be opportunity.
I don't see me on Mahogany Row, meaning where all the executive offices are. I don't see minorities in managerial positions. I think we have two. Roberts in LA and in Houston, we have Dusty Baker, and Dusty Baker struggled to get back into the game. You know, the goal here is to figure out what the solutions are to have participation and real participation, real inclusion, really involved in the future of the game of baseball in order to make the new culture something that's bigger and better.
Not to echo what Reggie said, but I'd like to see a lot more opportunities, especially upper management, coaches, managerial positions. I feel that baseball probably need to go a little bit stronger when it comes to marketing African Americans. The Black community, I think they can do a little bit better job than, you know, what has been shown.
Dave.
If there's one thing nowadays, it's hard. There's not just one thing, but if you want some excellent players, they better get into that Black community once again. The players that they used to play the game, Reggie would say, amen. He said, we were the best. We're as good as they came, you know, that as good as they could be in this game. And that's who we modeled ourselves after, and you had comfort level. I know everybody's stung into awareness right now. We'll see the action that they take because it's kind of embedded. It's systemic right now where people are excluded. They got to do a lot better job. Not a little better, a lot better.
Derek, I'm curious your thoughts, not only as a player, but also as a position of an owner and CEO of a team. How do you think we engage with those youngsters to get them back playing baseball and the changes that need to come?
Yeah, well, I think they all touched on it because, you know, it's got to start with diversity in leadership positions, right? And you know, from diversity, you learn from others' experiences, you know, variety of ideas, things that you never thought about before. And, you know, there's a lot of qualified Black men and women, and they need to have that opportunity. And that's the bottom line. But once again, we can't talk about it. There has to be action items. And, you know, I'm happy to hear that there's a lot of organizations that are very supportive of the movement that is happening right now in this day and age, or this particular time. But there has to be action items. You just can't talk about it. You have to do it. And, you know, so I am still hopeful. You know, I hope that it is a little bit different this time, but you know, if you need change, it has to start at the top.
Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. As Derek started with, you have to understand where you're coming from to know where you're going. Thank you, Hall of Famers, for this conversation that is so needed at this time that we're in.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.